Hi, I'm Julie Ross.
And I'm Gregory Abbey.
And you're listening to the Parenting Horizons podcast.
Julie is a longtime parent educator and counselor.
And Greg is an actor, writer, and director, and more importantly, a parent just like you.
Through conversations covering a range of different topics, challenges, and roadblocks, we hope to give you a few of Julie's tools that might just help make parenting a little bit easier.
Look, nobody's perfect, and parenting is challenging, to say the least. With a few skills under our belts, though, we might just be able to be good enough parents and enjoy the journey and our children a little bit more in the process.
Okay, so I think we're at episode 7.
I think we are too.
So let's just get right into this one. And what we talked about is calling this one Put on a Happy Face. Mm-hmm. I'd also like to call it maybe Find Your Happy Place, because I have some relatives that do that sometimes, and it can be super irritating. In a way, and we're talking about this in relationship to feelings and maybe feelings with kids. You know?
Sure. Yeah.
You know, one of the reasons we came up and started talking about doing this particular episode is an anecdote came up in the previous episode that I almost jumped in with this idea of put on a happy face, because I feel a particular affinity for this because it was an issue in my own family with myself. And I'll go into that a little bit, and then maybe down the road I can talk about how maybe that affected me more as an adult.
Sure.
But the story you were telling me, and the reason and so anyway, I kind of pinged to that when it comes up. And the anecdote you were telling, and this is a little different, but the anecdote was about a woman whose infant was biting her. So in order to deal with that, she had left the child in a room. I don't know. Can you explain it better than me? I think it was the when you, I feel because, and she was biting the mother. And so she said to the child, you know, if you bite me again, I'm going to leave the room, sort of setting a clear boundary. And when the child did, the woman left the room.
Right.
And the child, of course, which was an infant, I think.
I believe the baby
months?
was maybe 16 months old
16
or
months,
something,
okay.
Just a little over a year.
Right. But the baby got, of course, very upset because the mother left the room.
Right.
And the way you were telling the story was that she was very upset when she was relating to this story, like, oh, it went terrible. And you were like, why did it get go so terribly? And the woman was like, well, the baby was crying. She was so upset. The child was so upset. And then eventually went back into the room and the baby calmed down. And actually what you were saying to her was like, did it work? Did the child stop biting you? And the woman was like, well, yes, she did.
Right.
And you're like, I think it worked. But what pinged me so much was this unbearable feeling that this woman had, that the infant was crying and crying, and she was so upset, and she was so upset, and she was so upset. And it's kind of like, yes, she was so upset. And this need to comfort because the child is sad.
Right.
And it's definitely different, I think, in that situation because it's that baby was 16 months, but it immediately pinged me because I thought, oh, here it is. This child is upset, is uncomfortable. Let me rush in and kind of try to fix it.
Right. Well, I think the through line here, Greg, is that it's problematic when parents aren't capable of tolerating their children's uncomfortable feelings.
Yes, and I want to dig into that, and just to give some context and why I think, and we can talk about the ramifications of that and how that can play out is, you know, my parents were great. They were super kind. They were super supportive. But I also think they were of a generation, which not all parents were, but a lot of the parents of the 50s and 60s, there was not a lot of talk of negative, uncomfortable feelings.
Right. Exactly.
So, you know, if I had to come up with a particular example of how that played out in my own family was my dad was in the Air Force, so we moved a lot. We moved every couple of years. And it was, you know, I know in retrospect, when I look back, you might not be conscious of it at the time as a child, that it was pretty traumatic. Because I often, like, you know, when I think about it, school is K through 12. I went to 8 different schools during that stretch.
Wow, that's a lot of transitions.
So there was a lot of transitions and a lot of moving, and a lot of times around this moving was a lot of like, it's going to be great. It'll be fun. You're going to meet new friends, and this will be exciting. Or there wasn't any talk of it at all, and what there wasn't a lot of exploration around was how painful it could be, or the negative feelings around it. And And I don't think they did that purposely. I think it was a way of functioning like, okay, let's get to our happy place in a way. Let's talk about, what's going to be good about this. And I think for me, it became a way of coping in my own life that eventually I ran into trouble with down the road, which I can talk about at some point. Yeah. So, this is a really particular thing that always kind of resonates with me. And I don't know, do you want to just get into a little bit about why that's can be detrimental?
Sure. I'll share, a brief story from my own childhood, which is that I'm the child of divorced parents. My mother remarried, so we had step-grandparents who were exactly the same as real grandparents to me. But they had a cry room. So and I was a very sensitive child. It's a superpower. Not something negative.
I was a sensitive child.
And it is a superpower.
Yeah.
But I was told if I became upset at their house, which we were there every Sunday after church, I was told that I had to go into the cry room if I was going to cry.
Oh, rough.
So I think it's it's kind of the flip side of the same coin. I think, and my husband's version of it was they called him the happy little elf. So I think... Oh,
you mean like he was rewarded for always being joyous, you mean?
Yeah, and expected to always be joyous.
Right.
Always expected to take things well. And he was super sensitive as well.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of sort of setting up how this plays out. And I feel like I have to mention this. Like, I don't want to go down a political rabbit hole.
Right.
Because if I take... There's a lot of things I can take from the last 4 years, but one of the things I take is there's a lot of shouting on both sides and not enough listening.
Yes.
But I will say, like, Trump did a lot of things I wasn't necessarily a fan of. And there is something that happened recently that, again, just sort of pinged me that tells me, like, this is still a societal thing.
Mm-hmm.
And also, he's older. He's 74 or 5, I think. So he's of that generation. But it was interesting. So after he left office and Fauci started going out and giving these interviews because he was kind of unleashed a little bit in terms of who he could talk to.
Right.
And one of the things I heard him say that just sort of got in my mind was that he said early on during the pandemic when he would come out and speak about it that Trump would literally call him and say, can't you be more positive?
Yes.
When you go out and talk about this, can't you be more positive?
Yes.
This idea that if you share negative feelings, that don't uncork that.
Right.
I mean, and Trump even spoke to Woodward in that book about this idea that, I didn't want to share everything with the public because I didn't want to panic them.
Right.
I didn't want to tell them the bad parts of this.
Yeah.
And I just feel like that sort of idea really still permeates a lot of people's thinking.
Sure. And I think one of the things that also is still happening societally, in our country at least, is that specifically children who are identified male at birth are basically constricted from having any uncomfortable feelings.
Right.
They can have anger, right? Or they can be happy. But they're really not, don't be a crybaby.
Right. Suck it up.
Suck it up. Put your big boy pants on.
Right.
All of those kind of things.
Feelings and vulnerabilities. That's a girl thing. It's
right.
Feminine,
Right. And so I think...
And that's kind of a base way of saying it, but I think that gets sort of put across in all kinds of messages, subtle and not, right?
Oh, absolutely. And the amount of shame, I think, that is heaped on, specifically, again, children who are identified male at birth, there's a shaming aspect to that.
Right.
That doesn't allow, children who are born male or ultimately come through society as male, that it's so shaming that they can't allow themselves to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And vulnerability is a very, very important aspect of being in healthy relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to access your emotional intelligence.
Right. And also having a range of feelings. Because I think, you said it at the beginning of this, and I think how key it is for both parents and children is to become comfortable with uncomfortable feelings.
Yep.
And I think, that's what I ended up struggling with. Not being really aware of it,
Right.
So I kind of learned a behavior. And again, like my parents were great. This wasn't malicious. I think they thought in a way, which a lot of parents do, is like, I'm helping him by kind of pushing aside these negative feelings. Let's find our happy place, put on a happy face. And as I'm sure you'll attest to, like the problem with that is those feelings don't go away.
Right.
Because you deny them. So whether the parent is denying them or the child is denying them these negative feelings, it's not that they go away. And I think for myself, what became challenging and that I realized in retrospect as I got older, whether it was in work, whether it was in relationships, with friendships or romantic relationships, that I had a very difficult time being comfortable with uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah.
And in a way, I think you can get by a lot because I was a fairly successful, I guess, kid, on paper. Like I got good grades, I had friends, I went to college. But then when I started to run into some issues when I was older where things weren't going so great, I had very little capacity to deal with it. I know I was very overwhelmed by negative feelings that felt huge in the moment.
Yeah.
Because I had spent 25, 26 years of emotionally functioning a certain way that really, really limited me. And it was around this idea of put on a happy face.
Right, exactly. Well, ultimately, Greg, what happens is that if parents don't tolerate their own uncomfortable feelings and role model how to handle that, right? That's a big key thing here. So they're not teaching that to their kids. And then when they don't tolerate their kids' feelings, what ultimately happens is the opposite of what most parents are seeking, which is that they raise children who are fragile. And this past week, I had a dad say to me,
can I just ask you, when you say fragile, you mean like they're fragile because their inability to deal with negative feelings or a range of feelings?
Well, I would say uncomfortable feelings.
The
range of uncomfortable feelings that we can have.
So you were saying you had a dad that said...
So I had a dad this past week, and I was talking to him about this because, he has a kiddo who's young, fairly young, in elementary school. And basically, he said his goal is to develop a kid who has grit and resilience. And those are great goals.
Right.
What he failed to see is that grit and resilience are first and foremost, about being able to have feelings that are uncomfortable, to tolerate those feelings, and to work through those feelings.
Well, and that's really what grit is.
Yeah.
Is when you get knocked on your butt, can you take in what it is and then get back up? And not pretend like everything's fine and get back up, but sort through those feelings. I think it's really important because it's not just the child, it's the parent. Because if the parent is uncomfortable with negative feelings in themselves, the acknowledgement of that, and I really do feel like there's this societal generational thing that a lot of people feel like, don't talk about that. Let's just not talk about that. I mean, you hear that everywhere. That's sort of classic, you know, the Irish Catholic family, that just no, we do not speak of that. We don't, we pretend like it's not there. And the problem is that it's there.
Right.
The ignoring it does not make it go away.
No. And a lot of people, I think, confuse acknowledgement of those feelings. Like when your child is having an uncomfortable feeling, whether it's sadness or frustration or disappointment or whatever it might be, parents confuse acknowledging that feeling with condoning, either wallowing in the feeling or condoning the behavior that is accompanying the feeling.
Yeah, what is it? Why are parents worried about it? Is that it? They're like, well, if I acknowledge this kid is going to stay sad and depressed forever?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. That's what I hear from parents is, well, I don't want to condone this.
Like if I give in to this, it's kind of indulgent almost.
Yeah, and that's exactly the word the father used that I spoke with this past week. He said, I don't want to indulge this. And I was like, well.
And indulging what though? The child's
the
upset?
feeling. Yeah, the feeling.
Well, It's curious because I'd be curious to know what his makeup is that he feels that way. Because
Exactly.
I'm totally projecting, but potentially this man, this father, maybe potentially was never allowed to have his own negative feelings acknowledged. And I think there's this fear, like you said, that, gosh, if I acknowledge this feeling, they're going to be dealing with this forever. And wouldn't you say that the opposite is true? The way to move through those feelings is to name them and show up in a way that says, hey, this is okay. That then,
Right.
this is probably a simplistic take, but I think a lot of simplistic takes are true, is that in the acknowledging of the negative feeling, even if you just take time to say, I'm sad, I'm frustrated, man, this is hard. This is really hard. And for the parent to go like, I get you, this is hard. That if you can have the experience of it, then you can put it aside or live with it, right? And move forward.
Or figure out how to handle it.
Right.
Sometimes there are strategies that you can apply that help you move through these. I think Buddha, it was, who said, life is suffering. And then when we finally admit that life is suffering, we suffer less.
Right.
So that's kind of stark, a little hard edge to say life is suffering. But I think we could modify that a bit to say, look, there are going to be periods of discomfort in life. And when we acknowledge that there are going to be periods of discomfort in life, we give ourselves the ability to become more comfortable.
Right, absolutely. Well, it sounds like, what you just said made me think, because there's so many other avenues where parents implement skills. Like, I'm going to give my kid piano lessons. They're going to take soccer and get training. Oh, I'm going to get a tutor to help them in their English. So I assume that there's skills that they can develop, right? This is the same thing that the parent and the child can develop to help with this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it speaks to the idea that as a society, we place more emphasis on IQ than EQ. So IQ is intelligence quotient.
Sure.
And so that's I want to make sure that my child goes to school and gets
good grades.
Yeah, gets good grades, or, receives the help they need in math and the support that they need in reading or whatever. We're very supportive of our children's IQ, right?
Right,
or
sort of the pragmatic recognition of success, whether it's in grades or, hey, you got into Harvard and, oh, you're the top of your team. Right?
Yeah. And when a child is struggling, let's just say they're struggling in math or history, right? We're the first one to say, how can I support that?
Right.
Let me, I'll do flashcards with you, or, for those who can afford it, we'll get you a tutor or get extra meetings with the teacher. So we support our children when they're struggling with academic or in quote unquote intelligence issues. But EQ, which is the emotional quotient, is something that we have a tendency to ignore. When in reality, we should be developing their strengths, their emotional strengths, in exactly the same way as we're helping them develop their academic or intellectual strengths.
And what are some of the ways that you can do that? I mean, is it sort of the obvious things of showing up in an empathetic way when the child is struggling? Because the idea too, and I've heard this from, therapists, that, a feeling is not a fact.
Correct.
And I think that's what can get scary about it. And then if you don't deal with it, eventually down the road, it's going to get, like in my case, because I had never really figured out how to deal with those, they felt so big that they were unmanageable. Like if I had had a lifetime of maybe trying to figure it out, it wouldn't have felt so overwhelming. Because I think that's the thing. And I think that's what you said about, parents get worried if they're going to acknowledge it, like this is their existence, but no, feelings move through you. And I think that's where you want to get to, is that you have, a range of emotion that's up and down. You're on the flow of that can come in and out. Ideally, I think that's what we're all striving to, is that you can experience the positive and a negative, and you can sort of constantly be moving through that.
Yeah, because I think what happens is that people get stuck. I was talking with someone who was talking about their mother, and their mother kind of lived a miserable existence all the way up until her death, because she couldn't cope with the idea. And every conversation this person had with their mother wound up with the mother saying at the end, Well, it's just not fair.
Hmm.
Life isn't fair. Yeah. I mean, life isn't fair.
Life isn't fair.
Right. And parents tell me that their kids will say that. Well, it's not fair. And a parent will say to me, well, what do I say to that? And I said, you say, you're right.
And I think that's such an important point, because I think that's the other thing, that if parents constantly coddle the child around negative feelings and pacify them and try to soothe them without really dealing with them, a child can grow up and constantly feel like life isn't fair and how could this happen to me? And you're absolutely right. Life isn't fair. Like, things don't always go your way.
Right.
But if you have no ability to deal with that, you are going to be really frustrated, because you're constantly going to feel like, what is this negative experience? This isn't right.
Right.
It's like, well, no, welcome to the universe.
Exactly. And that kind of leads back to this idea of, when we get that life isn't fair and we learn strategies to cope with that, we're more resilient, right? So grit and resilience, we come back to that same, kind of goal, I would say, that parents should be having for their kids. But going back to this idea of kind of the confusion that I think parents have around this, parents either deny the big feelings, deny the uncomfortable feelings, sending kids off to the cry room or telling kids to put on a happy face, or, let's
find your
look at
happy place.
Find your happy place.
Look at this shiny TV show.
Exactly. Or the other thing I think happens is that they chase their kids around trying to fix the uncomfortable feelings, as if it's not okay to just sit with your uncomfortable feelings. That certainly happened to me as well. My mother, who had her flaws, right? But she was actually a school counselor. If I would be too long in the bathroom,
right,
the knock would come at the door. Knock, 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 knock. Are you okay in there? Is everything okay? And she didn't mean physically. She meant, are you having a feeling that we need to talk about or fix? Anytime I was by myself for too long,
sensitive
in her opinion,
Julie.
Yeah,
she's probably in the bathroom worrying about something or upset about something again. I better check on her, because we don't want that.
Exactly. And so I got the impression that uncomfortable feelings weren't okay.
Right. Right.
You weren't allowed to have uncomfortable feelings.
Sure.
So when I would cry about something, and I was a crier, I probably, would still be considered a crier. I cry less easily now. But when I would cry about something, I would feel shame around that.
That's too bad, because I was hoping you would say I would feel better.
I wish.
Right.
I was talking to my daughter just last night, and she's a crier. She's what I would call a hyper empath, and her EQ is very high, what has been since birth or shortly thereafter. And she said, Mom, crying is my superpower. And I thought, wow.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool, because it allows her to move through the feeling and to release.
I'm just thinking of poor men. I can't imagine very few would be allowed or feel comfortable to say that.
No.
Well,
I mean, I don't think men are allowed to cry. You could speak to that experience better than I know.
Yeah, they weren't insensitive around that. It was just a more of, like I said, I think that generation of parenting and families that didn't talk about negative stuff.
Yeah.
And that it was better to put on a happy face. And I was just thinking, I know I already told you this, but as I was thinking more about this, I thought about, in terms of, I said, like, with society and how this still is so prevalent. Like, we have happy hour.
Oh, yeah.
I love happy hour. Happy hour is great. But then when I love going to happy hour, but I was thinking about it more. It's just so funny that it's called happy hour. And the idea is like, hey, you just got off work. It was probably pretty stressful. Maybe you got in a fight with your boss. Let's get loaded and eat a bunch of terrible food. And listen, I love to do that as much as the next person. But it when I dive into it, it's just so ironic. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
It's called happy hour. Let's go to a bar and drink.
Yeah.
Which I think is something we need to talk about, is sort of what else can happen on the offshoot of denying negative feelings. But I did, because I think I may have asked you this, but didn't allow you to answer it. What are some of the important things for parents to keep in mind around this idea, or things that they can do in terms of skills.
Well, I just want to point out one thing about what you just said, though, about happy hour. That is a version of, if I'm having an uncomfortable feeling, I'm going to numb it.
Yeah, right.
So it could be happy hour with alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be anything. I think one of the things that kids who have not been told or taught to tolerate uncomfortable feelings are more likely to engage in self-harm, like cutting, are more likely to engage in drug and alcohol use, are more likely to have suicidal ideation.
Absolutely. There's been a million articles about that. And that is the thing I wanted to touch on, is that the other sort of negative offshoot of that is like, I think it can make it difficult to function in relationships relationally.
Absolutely.
I know I ran into those problems. I was sort of a runner. Like I had run away. Like, this is getting negative. And it wasn't even a conscious thing, but now looking back, I'd see myself breaking, like I'm out of here.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that, and that was my point about those feelings don't go away.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, they just get shoved somewhere, and then they come out sideways.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like you said, I think they can manifest in drug and alcohol abuse, eating disorders, destructive relationships.
Yeah.
It's a human experience. Like, you cannot deny those feelings,
Right, exactly. And, it's dangerous to deny those feelings, as we're talking about. There are some really serious side effects if you deny those feelings. So to your point of, what can parents do? People who have been listening to our podcast thus far are probably going to laugh a little bit because
you got to repeat something?
Yeah, listening,
I think it's great. I think we could say it every episode.
Right. I feel like, and it's not just listening.
It's not trying to fix, correct?
Exactly.
Let me fix this negative feeling, this negative experience.
Right. But it's acknowledging what the other person is experiencing. So number one, it validates their reality.
Mm-hmm.
So we've said feelings aren't facts. So what we mean by that is, it's not that it's factual that we have feelings.
Correct.
Right? That is a fact. But the feeling that we're having doesn't mean that there's a fact attached to it. So, for example, if we're feeling afraid, it doesn't mean that there's something to be afraid of. We may just be having that feeling because of our unique perspective on what's going on. Right?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I also was thinking of it in terms of, maybe when I say a feeling is not a fact, also that it doesn't define who you are as a person. It's not a fact of your personality. It's a feeling you're having in the moment. It doesn't mean you're weak and scared person. It means like you're having that feeling, and if you're able to acknowledge it, frustration, desperation, humiliation, if you're able to acknowledge it, then you can move through it. It's not a fact. It's not a character defect of yours.
Right, exactly. And I think so many people grow up believing that it is a character defect, a defect, a character flaw. So the way that parents can acknowledge their children's feelings in order to help their children tolerate those uncomfortable feelings is through that listening process that we've discussed and probably will continue to discuss in every podcast, which really involves putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, figuring out what might I feel in a similar circumstance, or what am I seeing in terms of the expression on my child's face, their body language, their tone of voice, and then naming it without discomfort. And Greg, the thing is, it's not just about the naming. It's about naming and empowering, acknowledgement and empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
So that you don't name it and then say, deal with it.
Right. What's the empowerment piece?
So the empowerment piece is to support your child in coming up with solutions to move past or through this feeling when solutions are available. So like, let's just say a time when a solution might not be available is if your child's responding to someone's death. There's no solution to that.
Right.
You feel your feelings. The parent should normalize those feelings. Of course you're grieving. It's hard. I know that you're feeling upset, bewildered, sad, angry, all of those feelings. And that's normal.
Right.
And so
I love it. So the idea is to normalize that experience.
Right. And truthfully, we should be normalizing all experiences. So whether they are quote unquote solvable or not. So an example of a solvable uncomfortable feeling might be your kid comes home with a grade on a paper that they feel was unfairly given. So they're upset about it. And they're like, I hate that teacher, and that teacher's the worst. And I, this is not fair. And so the first job of the parent is to say, I hear that you feel like this is not fair. Tell me more. Right? So that the child can explore that uncomfortable feeling.
Right. This is a repetition of something you say a lot, is the curiosity is really important, right?
So important. It's so important.
Instead of telling them what you think or what they should do, is explore it with them, especially when they're in a state like that, right? Tell me more is what you always say. Well, I love that.
Tell me more. Tell me more. And then the empowerment piece of it is, is there something you can think of that you could do about this? What do you think would happen if you went to the teacher and expressed that you feel like, this paper's mismarked, or that the instructions weren't clear? So we run the risk there of, first of all, cutting short the empathetic piece. So we have to be careful to
not to get to solution too quickly.
Correct.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
So it's a little risky, but if we feel that we've stayed with and hung with that feeling for long enough for the child to vent about it, then it's possible to move into the empowerment piece. The other risk there, though, is that what we don't want to do is we don't want to give advice to our child.
Right.
So we don't want to say, well, just go to your teacher and tell them that you don't think this grade is fair. Because I think we've said in a previous episode, advice is what we call a communication block. And
why do you call it a communication block?
Because...
And will you briefly, I'll try to keep you on track. I know I keep interrupting you.
That's okay.
Define communication block. Because I know you talk about those a lot in your work.
Right, exactly. Well, I don't know if we've done... We should do
an
episode on all of the communication blocks.
But generally, what is a communication block?
A communication block communicates that we're not...
In tune?
We're not in tune, and we're not tolerating the other person's feelings. So communication blocks come across as a rush. Well, this particular one of giving advice comes across as, a rush to a solution. Well, here's what you should do. And first of all, adult solutions are not the same as child solutions. And I don't care if we're talking about a 3-year-old or we're talking about a 22-year-old. The mature decisions that our brains allow us to make, presumably, after age 25 are not ones that are going to be accessible to an under 25-year-old, generally speaking. I don't want to offend any late adolescents who might think well of their own ability to solve problems. But we want to make sure that we don't cut short the thinking process or cut short the feeling process. And, if we're talking about helping a kid develop resilience, what we're really talking about is helping a kid develop strategies that are in their back pocket.
And you mentioned that at the beginning of this. I think the idea is that the empowerment comes from involving them in the process as opposed to telling them what to do, which you might get around to that. But it's like, I like that you said, like, hey, how do you think, is there something we could do here? What do you think?
Right, exactly. Or, let's say, let's put it in adult terms. Let's say that you auditioned for an acting job, right? And you didn't get the part. And you came to me and you said, I can't believe it, I didn't get the part. And I say to you, well, Greg, I don't understand. Why didn't you just... And then I fill in the blank with some sort of advice. I don't think that would make you happy.
No.
I think you might be actually angry that I was... jumping in like that. And the same thing happens for kids. When we jump in with advice it communicates to the child that there are very simple solutions, and you're particularly dumb that you didn't think of the solution.
Well, it's all... Yeah, I mean, as you're talking, what I'm thinking about is like, it's sort of acknowledging where they're at, that anyone's upset, it's their upset, and it's true for them. So like an example I'm thinking of as you're talking about is like a 16-year-old who breaks up with his girlfriend and is totally devastated, and maybe you as an adult know, okay, this is maybe over the top, and but that's not for you to say. It's acknowledging where they are. It's not your experience, it's theirs experience. Even if you feel like this feels a little over the top, a little dramatic, unnecessary, that's beside the point. It's about, this is where they're at, regardless of how you feel about it.
Yeah, and that's spot on. Now, the empowerment piece does appeal to the fact that as adults, presumably, because we're older, that we may have wisdom that we can share, right? The key to making it not advice is, first of all, to ask them the question, have you thought of anything you could do about this? Or another good question is, how did you handle that? Which assumes that they did handle it. And that, they have a, kind of drawer of solutions that they can open and call upon. And then if they're like, nope, 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 then to be able to say, well, what do you think would happen if you blank, with a question mark at it after it? So that, what do you think would happen if, or I wonder what would happen if
you went to the teacher. So you may, it's a way of offering a solution without, it doesn't sound so much, you're sort of offering up an idea as opposed to telling them what to do. Is that this phrasing of it you're sort of doing?
Yes. Because if they say yes to that, like, well, what do you think would happen if you went to the teacher and asked about that problem that you're concerned about? And they say, that's a good idea. Then it's their idea. It's not your idea anymore. And they then, because they have ownership of it, they also have accountability for it. In other words, they're more likely to follow through on it.
Yes. They have some agency around it, which I also think is a piece of this. If you're constantly solving the problems for them, that's an issue that could come up down the road, is they don't have agency. Or they get into codependent relationships where they're waiting for the other person to solve their upset or figure things out for them.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And the other thing it does is that then, because they have ownership of it and agency around it, it becomes part of their solution drawer. How did I handle that in the past?
Right.
And it becomes an experiential success, right? Let's say they take that and they go and say to their teacher, what about this problem? The teacher says, oh, you're right, I made a mistake. Voila. They've had success solving a problem and working through the feeling that led to that solution.
Yeah, and now they have that in their back pocket as they go through life, and hopefully those things build. I think it's so great what you said. Now they have this they have this experience of getting off the mat, dealing with the negative feeling, figuring out a way to move through it with or without the help of the parent. So when you run into that again, because again, life isn't fair. Like, this is going to happen again. That's what it's all about. Is like, how do you get off the mat and deal with these things and keep going? That's all great. I think before, why don't we wrap up with, I want to touch on a little bit, I guess, two things, and they're around maybe like happiness and depression, because I also don't want to diminish the idea of creating a happy child. But, as I was reading some of this stuff, that shouldn't maybe be your main focus, is that what is your main goal, is to have the child be happy. It's more that they have the ability to sort through feelings, but that also doesn't mean like that well-being and searching for happiness and wanting happiness is actually a great goal. Like, what self-care can you or your child do around so that you can create a sense of happiness in life? Because of course you want to be happy, but that's different than be happy, ignore these negative feelings.
Yeah. When I think about that, happiness as a goal is too much of a burden.
Yeah.
And it kind of, be happy all the time comes to mind. And that nobody can
it's impossible
achieve that. Right.
Right.
But happiness as part of a journey, I think, is what we're really hoping for here, is that we do move through the inevitable feelings of discomfort that occur with being a human being.
Mm-hmm.
and recognize that feelings are fluid and don't stick around forever.
Right.
So on the other side of the unhappiness lies happiness. It's two sides of the same coin. We can't have happiness without having unhappiness. It's like having a nickel with just heads.
Yes.
Then it's not a nickel.
Well, I loved what you just said. Feelings are fluid.
Yeah.
I think that's also in relationship to when I think of a feeling as not a fact.
Mm-hmm.
That's the idea. And I think the goal for myself and hopefully for my children is that they have a fluidity of feelings, because you're going to have all these feelings. But if you ignore them, they're not going anywhere. The idea is that you're able to kind of hopefully, ideally, take them in and out, because feelings are fluid and they come and go. And, if you acknowledge it, happiness or sadness or frustration, they're not going to last. Right. They're going to last if you try to push them away or pretend like they're not there. Or like we said, they're going to come out sideways, destructive relationships, drugs and alcohol, eating disorders. That's a part of life. And I love that you said that, this idea that you can't really get to contentment, a happiness, unless you acknowledge a part of the other piece, right?
Yeah. And I mean, and it goes back to those two terms that the father this past week used, grit and resiliency, right? If we're stretchable in our feelings, if we're able to stretch and accommodate the high highs and the low lows, that's resiliency.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're able to get through the low lows, that's grit. So it's so critical, I think, that parents pay as much attention to their children's emotional quotient, their emotional intelligence, because otherwise we do wind up with emotionally fragile children or adults.
Yeah. I also just want to speak, because when you talk about grit, and it's something I've thought about a lot, I think what you're basically saying, and how I've come to think of it and haven't always think of it, is that grit is not, I'm going to put my head down and plow through this. I'm going to put my head down, I'm going to get through this, and I'm going to get back up. That's a piece of it, but you can't lose a sense of your internal life.
Right.
It's got to be both. Like, it can't be, I'm going to put my head down and pretend I'm going to ignore this other stuff and just plow and get up and do the work and do all the things. It's just not the way for me to think about grit.
No, I completely agree. What you're describing to me sounds, instead of like grit, it sounds like denial.
Right,
or the old pull yourself up by your bootstraps, young person. And all of that is like squash down your feelings. Just, you, like you said, put your head down and you'll get through this.
It's just unsustainable, right?
It's not sustainable. I mean, we're human beings, right? And we need to take opportunities to nurture ourselves, our souls,
right,
for lack of a better term. And that means saying, wow, I'm really bummed out today.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's okay, because feelings are fluid and I will get through this.
Yeah. And then I think the last thing to touch on is that, you said, I'm really bummed out today. And there is a difference between having a negative feeling or uncomfortable feeling, moving through that. We all have uncomfortable feelings. That there's sometimes uncomfortable feelings that persist, right? And we've talked a little bit about the blues and depression.
Yeah.
And that's a real thing, that you might be in a situation with a child that they can't get out of that, right? That these negative feelings, your acknowledgement, it's not, that may reach a point that it could be a chemical thing. I'm not a big proponent of medicine, but I'm also not against antidepressants. I think they can be helpful in situations, right? To get someone back on their feet. And can you just speak to a little bit about that situation, whether it's therapy, whether it's an antidepressant, that sometimes that might be needed if these negative feelings persist, which is something different from your child's having an uncomfortable feeling, showing up and acknowledging it, as opposed to they're in a place that they can't get out of, or it's consistent. I think you've said in the past, like 2 weeks, maybe?
Yeah, 2 weeks is generally what we look at in terms of the timeline, particularly if unhappiness lasts, with crying, withdrawal, lack of engagement in normal life events. If that goes on for a period of 2 weeks, then we need to look at it as a chemical issue, potentially. And there are things, that manifest as feelings that are actually chemical imbalances.
Right.
Anxiety is one of those. Depression is one of those.
Sure.
ADHD is also one of those. Kids can feel very uncomfortable with that, and it's a chemical imbalance. So, it stands to reason that the parents need to do a reasonable amount to enhance their children's emotional quotient and realize as well that sometimes that may not be enough.
Absolutely. And yeah. And I've talked to some parents even recently, whether it was about ADHD medication, whether it's about antidepressants. I mean, I understand that some parents feel concerned, like, I don't want to start this. And what does that mean? And for the child, and definitely in some situations, what I've always shared is that, this is not a forever thing.
Right.
But sometimes it's needed. And sometimes, then it's a thing about, like, why don't you try this and see if there's a difference? Because you know what? You can always stop it.
Yeah.
But if it's going to help a person, and I'm sure you've seen it, I've certainly seen it. My wife's a therapist. She's talked about it often. It doesn't mean you should be on medicine the rest of your life, but some people and some children need some help getting out of a place, and that can be a real asset, along with talk therapy. I mean, I'm sort of big proponent of it should never just be a medical fix and medicine fix, and you have to take some proaction, be proactive in your lifestyle in certain ways. I also think talk therapy is a huge part of it. But I guess I just wanted to touch on that this, negative feelings, uncomfortable feelings can drift into something that's really real that needs to be addressed on a medical level.
Oh, sure. And or not even just drift into that, but that can be the source. There can be a chemical imbalance that is the source of depression that has or anxiety or whatever, that has nothing to do with trying to move through a feeling. And what I say, Greg, to parents who are uncomfortable with the idea of medicating a child, I get it. Like, that's
it's not an easy decision.
No, and I would never consider that to be the first course of action. But if it's needed, it's the equivalent of if a child is struggling to see the board at the front of the classroom because they're having vision problems, right? And they're super uncomfortable because they can't
And it's been
see.
consistent.
And it's been consistent. Get their eyes checked, and they may need glasses.
Right.
Same thing. Maybe the serotonin levels are imbalanced. Maybe you need glasses for the brain, right? That allow you to not struggle so hard just to stay afloat.
Great. I think just as an end beat, do you think we could retire the phrase, find your happy place?
Oh, please. Could we?
Just find your happy place. It'll be fine. Okay, Mom, I'm just going to drink this margarita. I'll be good.
I wholeheartedly vote for retiring that phrase.
Okay, great.
Thanks for listening to the Parenting Horizons podcast.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please share with your family and friends. And if you'd like to hear more about Julie's work, join one of her parenting groups, or see about individual counseling, please visit parentinghorizons.com. Or you can email Julie at julie.ross@parentinghorizons.com.
See you next time.